I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, becoming independent. A Democratic senator leaves her party. We're tracking political fallout in the nation's capital. More Twitter turmoil. Reaction to the latest revelations about the platform's treatment of conservatives. Christmas carolers. How a Ukrainian youth choir is spreading a message of freedom. And here's the category. A Catholic high school teacher on Jeopardy. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thanks for being with us. Our top story tonight, two big developments on Capitol Hill, including a senator changing parties and the controversial use of your money. The Senate will soon consider a whopping $858 billion defense policy measure to fund the Pentagon after it passed the House this week. But part of the bill uses your taxpayer dollars to fund abortion travel for service members, and that has some lawmakers speaking out. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has the latest.
The massive $827 billion National Defense Authorization Act, which passed in the House this week, covers just about everything in the defense realm. But EWTN News Nightly has uncovered that the bill also allows taxpayer money to be used for travel expenses if a service member seeks an abortion in another state. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, a self-professed Catholic, praised the measure.
We did defeat the Republicans' extreme attack on health freedom, ensuring our troops can travel to access full services, reproductive services, including abortion, if stationed in an anti-choice state.
But Senator John Hoeven, another Catholic, tells me defense dollars should not be used for abortions.
That's a concern for me. That's not the kind of thing that should be in there. And unfortunately, what we're seeing from the Biden administration is they're putting their agenda into what should be support for our men and women in uniform.
The bill also drops a DoD mandate requiring troops to get COVID vaccine shots or be forced out of the military. Some 8,000 service members have lost their jobs so far. Senator Roger Marshall, a doctor, tells me the rollback is a big win.
We've had success ending the vaccine mandate in the military. That's going to save, thousands of soldiers, their careers. But I'm also very concerned about the soldiers that have already been kicked out of the military for refusing the vaccine. And I want to find a way to make them whole as well.
The Senate will consider the legislation next week. Meanwhile, a bill to fund the government remains stalled with only a week to go before a shutdown.
We'd like to see an omnibus, but by the way, if we don't get one, it's not that hard to say let's have a CR until February, when frankly the Republicans have the House of Representatives and we'll have a stronger hand at the bargaining table.
Also, another major shakeup for the Democratic Party. Just when they thought they had a 51-49 majority in the Senate, Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema has changed party affiliation to independent. Senator Joe Manchin and her now have more influence in legislation with the new Congress. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
With Senator Kyrsten Sinema saying she is removing herself from the partisan structure, the White House is reacting, calling the senator a key partner on some historic legislation and saying they expect to keep working with her going forward. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, tonight the White House does not seem too miffed or upset by the party switch. In fact, the press secretary, as expected, was asked about it repeatedly earlier this afternoon.
In the briefing room today, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre has asked more about Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona turning independent.
We understand why she would want to register as an independent, but we do not see the Democratic majority changing with this decision that she's made.
Also today, the 2022 Legal Aid Interagency Roundtable. Among those in attendance, Second Gentleman Douglas Emhoff and Attorney General Merrick Garland. The Biden administration says it is working to expand access to justice and reform the justice system.
Simply put, it means removing barriers, legal, social, financial, to ensure that every person can get the legal help that they need.
On the COVID front, First Lady Jill Biden speaks at a virtual town hall on what the White House says is the importance of getting an updated COVID-19 vaccine this holiday season, focusing on Americans ages 50 and up.
It reduces the risk of catching or spreading the disease, and it helps protect you from ending up in the hospital or worse. It's free.
Meanwhile, as U.S. lawmakers authorize $800 million in additional security assistance for Ukraine, the head of NATO expressed worry that the fighting in Ukraine could spin out of control and become a war between Russia and NATO. The Kremlin has repeatedly accused NATO allies of effectively becoming a party to the conflict by providing Ukraine with weapons.
We also learned in the White House press briefing room today that next Tuesday, President Biden will sign into law the heavily criticized Respect for Marriage Act. The bill, despite strong opposition by Catholic bishops and religious freedom advocates, and that ceremony will be taking place on the South Lawn. Also, next week, President Biden will be hosting the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit here at the White House. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
A social media giant Twitter faces new allegations. It is accused of secretly limiting the accounts of conservative users, even building blacklists to keep certain tweets from trending. Joining us tonight with more is Terry Schilling of the American Principles Project. Terry, great to have you with us. First off, your reaction to all of this, especially after former Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey testified under oath that the company did not censor conservatives.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Tracy. I love your audience. I love your show. This is not new, right? We conservatives have known about this problem with Twitter blacklisting and shadow banning people for several years now. And what Twitter did was they lied. They committed fraud. They lied under oath in some cases. It's criminal, and we need a full investigation. The thing that's incredible here is essentially Elon Musk thought he was buying a social media company, but in fact, he was buying a crime scene. Not only were they shadow banning conservative leaders, they were working in collusion with Democratic officials to suppress the vote for Republicans and to keep them from getting information out there about President Biden's son, Hunter Biden. It's just totally egregious, and it's totally un-American.
And Terry, can you tell us about exactly, who was targeted by Twitter? Any specific names?
Yeah, one of the biggest names is one of my good friends, Charlie Kirk. Charlie runs one of the largest political action organizations in the country for kids, for college kids and young people, and they suppressed his social media accounts. On top of that, they were suppressing Stanford doctors who were issuing concerns about the COVID response, about the shutdowns and the bogus information that we were getting from Dr. Fauci, which, by the way, we now know a lot of it was lies and misinformation from our government officials. They shut those accounts down and limited their approaches or their reach to the American people. And it was all to uphold lies. It's absolutely enraging. And we need to make sure that there are consequences to this type of un-American and illegal behavior.
Yeah, and Terry, it looks like more details are also surfacing about the 2020 presidential elections and Twitter clamping down on certain voices. Talk to us about that. And do you think Twitter and possibly other big tech platforms played a role in shaping the outcome of the election?
Without question, these big tech social media giants played a role in shifting the 2020 election. That election came down to less than 50,000 votes across those swing states. So absolutely, Twitter most egregiously censored the Hunter Biden story about his laptop with all of the dirty financial deals that Hunter was doing with Ukraine and the CCP and his drug use and prostitution and all this crazy stuff. And why? They claimed that it was because it was from the hacked source. There was no evidence from any government authorities that it was hacked. In fact, there was the exact opposite. There was only proof that it wasn't hacked. That was the biggest thing. And listen, I could point to other examples of them suppressing the election prior, but that's the presidential election, right? There are billions of dollars being spent. There are trillions of dollars at stake that the federal government spends. It's so corrupt. There's so much power here, and they flip the switch for progressives and for Democrats, and we need justice here.
And Terry, so much more we could talk about. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you so much for your insights. We always appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy.
WNBA star Brittney Griner returned to the U.S. this morning. She landed in San Antonio, Texas, after being held in a Russian detention center for nearly 10 months. Griner was recently exchanged for a Russian arms dealer known as the Merchant of Death. Another American, former Marine Paul Whelan, is still in Russian custody. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince announces a new oil agreement with China's Xi Jinping.
جائحة كورونا والدور المتنامي لدول مجلس ومنظومة مجلس التعاون في القضايا الإقليمية والدولية.
Mohammed bin Salman tells a gathering of Mideast leaders that China will increase imports from Gulf Arab states while not interfering in their affairs. President Xi also wants to conduct energy sales in the Chinese yuan rather than the U.S. dollar. Peru's new president says she plans on finishing her predecessor's 6-year term, but some people in Peru are calling for a new election. Political experts say it would be difficult for Dina Duterte to hold office due to her lack of support in Congress. She says there still is a need for stability in the country, which has had 6 presidents in the past 6 years. A UN humanitarian official says a cholera outbreak in Haiti is growing worse. More than 280 people have died since October, and nearly 12,000 are hospitalized. Most of the victims are children. The health crisis is compounded by hunger and gang violence in Haiti's capital. In Nicaragua, Catholics honor the Blessed Mother as the patroness of their country on the feast of the Immaculate Conception. The local bishop tells the faithful gathered at Leon Cathedral, quote, Nicaragua loves the Blessed Virgin Mary. The celebration of Our Lady as Purísima takes place while the church faces repercussions from the government of Daniel Ortega. Well, we have still more here to come on EWTN News Nightly, including a pro-life setback in Europe involving rules that govern witnessing at abortion facilities and an unexpected consequences from the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Thanks for staying with us. The United Kingdom's Supreme Court has ruled in favor of so-called safe zones near abortion clinics in Northern Ireland. This week's unanimous decision prohibits any pro-life witnessing, including silent prayer, within 100 meters of a provider. While Planned Parenthood calls it an act of love. The skyrocketing number of vasectomies in the wake of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. The organization reports a 34% increase in the procedure across their Northwest region since June. Last month, Planned Parenthood offices in Missouri even ran mobile vasectomy clinics for uninsured patients. And joining us tonight with a Catholic answer is Dr. Joseph Meany, president of the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Dr. Meany, great to be with you as always. A lot to unpack here. But first, I'd like to get your reaction to this headline.
Well, I think it's interesting that Planned Parenthood would be speaking about vasectomies in a very positive light because it treats abortion and the conception of children in a similar way. In other words, pregnancy is considered a huge problem. So if you can prevent it or end it violently, that's what makes Planned Parenthood happy.
And in some cases, I understand Planned Parenthood even offered free vasectomies to some patients. Dr. Meany, talk to us about the message that sends and the danger there.
Yeah, so unfortunately, vasectomies are the second most common surgical procedure on men in America after circumcision. It's a huge problem. And, from the Catholic perspective, it's a mutilation of healthy organs. So it combines the sin of contraception, birth control, with the sin of mutilation. So it's a very grave offense.
Yeah, and it's touted, at least by Planned Parenthood, as an easy, foolproof procedure. But I know you report it really does have a pretty sinister history as far as the practice of vasectomies goes, even a tie into racism. What more can you tell us about that?
So the original vasectomy procedure was created for prisoners, and the idea was kind of eugenicist, that certain people should not be allowed to reproduce. And so that was done actually at the turn of the 20th century. And then later on, that was kind of moved out into the general population and became extremely popular. What's very sad to see is that this procedure, which was basically developed as a human equivalent to what is done to animals, is now extraordinarily popular, and that Planned Parenthood is one of the leading organizations doing it.
Yeah, and talk to us a little bit more, Dr. Meany, about what the church teaches about this.
So any form of sterilization is a very serious sin. And the reason for that, of course, is that it's rejecting the gift of life. It's rejecting our own bodies. So, the theology of the body of St. John Paul II was very clear that we're supposed to be a gift to our spouses. We're supposed to give everything to them, and that includes our fertility. And so to treat fertility as if it was an illness and to mutilate perfectly healthy organs is a very grave violation of the moral law.
And I also understand that there's also an element of post-procedure regret with men and wanting to take part in a vasectomy that is reversal. What does the church teach on this? What's its stance on this?
So it is a more complicated procedure. It's much harder to repair than it is to destroy. But something like between 6 and 10% of men who have vasectomies have it reversed. And sometimes the success rates can be fairly high. The Catholic position is that one should try to reverse a vasectomy if it's financially and physically possible to do so. Because again, it's like repairing an error that was made in the past. If it's not possible, then one can simply confess it and say, one regrets that and get rid of the sin. But nonetheless, the possibility of reversal is real, and that should be something contemplated by people.
Dr. Meany, always great to have you on and sort all this out and get your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tracy.
An international group of Catholic theologians and other experts is holding a private workshop in Rome. The purpose is to respond to issues including sexual morality, moral norms, and conscience raised in the recent publication of the Pontifical Academy for Life. Joining us now from Rome is Pia De Seleni, moral theologian and speaker at the conference. Pia, great to have you. Can you tell us more about this conference and why it's so important?
Hi, Tracy. It's great to be back with you again. So this conference is being sponsored by the International Catholic Jurist Foundation, Ethics and Public Policy Center, and Ave Maria Law School. And it's an opportunity to look at the recent proceedings from the Pontifical Academy for Life that suggested that there might be a change in Humanae Vitae, the Church's teachings on contraception, as well as the teachings on in vitro fertilization. And because these teachings are so fundamental, and this represents really a seismic shift, this workshop came together to do really what Pope Francis has asked theologians and other experts to do: study these questions, do some thinking on it. And ultimately it's up to the magisterium to decide what the answer is, but we're really answering the Holy Father's call to do the work here of doing the in-depth study that needs to be done.
And Pierre, you were one of the speakers at the conference this morning. The Anthropology of Humanae Vitae, its challenges and need of support. That was the title of your talk. Would you mind summarizing that for us?
Sure. Well, as many of you know, Humanae Vitae is a very challenging document. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's challenging. And many of St. Paul VI's prophecies, or in fact all of them, have come true. And so now we have a culture, a world that has lived 50 years of his prophecies fulfilled, which is not a good thing. And so I talked about some of the challenges, the difficulties, and what we can do. I think the conversation needs to keep going. We can't simply say, okay, Humanae Vitae was written over 50 years ago, that's it, or Theology of the Body happened. This is a work in progress. And I worked with a priest colleague who pointed out to me, he said, we talk about the early Christians as the first couple of hundred years. He said, what if the earth and the church still exist in 10,000 years, and it's the first 2,000 years of Christianity that are the early Christians. So this is a work that we have to continue to do. And what I'm proposing is that we really look at what is required for relationality. Again, St. Paul VI and St. John Paul II laid the ground for this. But if you look at the difficulties in marriage, it's not complementarity or the lack of that. It's the capacity to be in relation. And so then we're getting back to some family issues, family of origin issues, which again, completely supported by both St. John Paul II's theology and a lot of our mental health sciences. And I think that's what we need to start focusing on. How do we fix that? How do we make it possible for people to be in relationship and to have that capacity and ultimately to be happy? Because that's what the church wants, is for people to be happy. And Humanae Vitae is clear about that in the very first paragraph.
Pia, we have probably about 30 seconds left or so, but quickly, in your opinion, how can this conference provide a service to the church and Catholic students?
Well, again, we need to do this deeper study, and so that's what's being done. We're looking at topics like conscience law, theology, anthropology, and this is a work that has just begun, and I think we're going to have to invite more people into this work.
Now, Pia, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. God bless you. Up next on EWTN News Nightly, what is a contestant? A Catholic high school teacher's experience on a popular TV game show. Plus, songs of Christmas sung by a youth choir from a war-torn country. We are back. While a Michigan high school teacher did not make it all the way to the Jeopardy Tournament of Champions, he did, however, score a lot of points with his students. Last week, Josh Greger, a high school Latin teacher at Sacred Heart Academy in Grand Rapids, Michigan, squared off with 20-time Jeopardy champion Chris Panullo. Josh Greger's Jeopardy ambitions ended with the first game, but the excitement in the halls of Sacred Heart Academy can still be heard today. And joining us tonight from Grand Rapids, Michigan, is Josh Greger. Josh, great to have you on. We're so excited to talk to you. Tell us about this experience and how you landed yourself a spot on Jeopardy.
Thank you. Well, I grew up watching Jeopardy a lot with my mom. Well, both my parents, but especially my mom. And so they have the online test that you can take to be on there. And I had always liked trivia, so I decided why not. So I've actually been taking the online test every year since 2015, and I never heard back until this past year. And I got a text from the Jeopardy producers, and they invited me to be on. So of course I was really excited too.
Yeah, what was your first initial thought when you got the response?
Oh gosh. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I was really excited. I wanted to tell people, but of course I wasn't allowed to then. I just told my wife, and then I told the headmaster here at the school to let him know why I need a sub for 4 days. But yeah, so yeah, it was exciting. I didn't really know what to expect, but yeah, it turned out to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet. I bet it was thrilling. As we mentioned, you're a Latin teacher. I know you also have a master's in linguistics, and you're even a former seminarian. Do you think that these accomplishments played into you being selected as a contestant?
Well, as far as whether that background played into what they select, I don't think so, because you don't really give them any personal information beforehand. You take the test, and then you have an online audition. It's like a Zoom call where you sort of play the game online so they can see how you would do on camera and stuff. But they didn't ask for a lot of background information beforehand. So I think it was more judging, do you know some trivia, and can you do it on camera? So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you certainly have a great life story. I know, as you mentioned, you grew up watching the show, and 7 years ago you started taking those online quizzes to prepare. Is there anything else you did to gear up for the big day?
Well, once I did know that I was going on, so I felt pretty confident in most areas of trivia, but sort of modern pop culture, movies and pop music and stuff, that's definitely where I felt least confident. So I started reading a bunch of Wikipedia articles on, recent Oscars and recent Grammy Awards and stuff like that I just don't naturally spend a lot of time with. So, yeah, in the end, none of the questions that I had studied actually came up on Jeopardy, but I did definitely put some effort into trying to shore up the areas where I felt a little weaker. So yeah, other than that, not a lot as far as studying, but I also watched the show every night, and I had a little pen with a clicker to practice buzzing in for the questions. So yeah, it was fun. And then, of course, I had to prepare.
Well, that is so exciting. Really quickly, Josh, we're almost out of time, Josh. But quickly, I want to ask you before we let you go, what about your students? What did they think about your performance on Jeopardy and seeing you on TV?
They were really excited. So the show aired last Friday. So I came back on Monday, and they were all like, "Wow, Mr. Greger, we saw you on Jeopardy. It was really great." And one of the students told me he had watched the episode 3 times. And a bunch of them asked if we could now play Jeopardy in class instead of studying what I had already planned for. But it was great. A lot of support from the families here, and a lot of the parents told me that they and their kids watched it. So it was a lot of fun to see.
Well, I bet. And you know what, Josh, you're a winner in our book. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it, and God bless you.
Yeah, thank you. God bless you too.
And finally tonight, from a darkened Kyiv bomb shelter to bright lights of the stage, a Ukrainian youth choir is spreading a message of freedom amid trying times. 2022 was meant to be a busy year for the 50 choir members, with many international concerts booked to mark the group's 50th anniversary. However, due to Russia's invasion earlier this year, children were scattered over the city of Kyiv. Most of their concerts were canceled.
When there are sirens, we go to the shelter and just sing with our phones and lights. With flashlights, yeah. With flashlights. But I think that we're kind of getting used to it because it's our...
Their most recent performance was a Christmas concert in Copenhagen. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.